Okay, thank you for staying for the Dharma exchange this morning. So I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Erin Hoffman. Am I pronounced? Yes. Okay, okay, sorry. So maybe she can introduce herself later, but she's one of the Dharma school parents. They also, did you graduate from IBS? No,
halfway through.
Halfway through. So she's still taking the halfway through the IBS Betsuin Buddhist certificate course. She's learning Buddhism. Then couple months ago, maybe sometime in June or July, we met. Then we talked about Buddhism and AI, which I don't have enough knowledge to talk about. So, but that sounds really interesting. Regardless, we are in the world of technology, world of AI right now. So, without noticing anything, probably we are using AI. We may be relying on AI sometimes. So, then how about Buddhism and AI? I don't know. Sorry, maybe I shouldn't talk too much. But so she's going to talk about Buddhism and AI today. So please listen. Then if you have any questions, maybe we can make some time for the question and answer too. Okay, thank you. Erin.
Okay, thank you very much, Sensei. So I also just found out that Reverend May talked to you about AI before last month. I think I was gone for summer vacation, so hopefully this won't duplicate too much. Oh, I left the clicker. Okay. So I'll give an introduction about myself a little bit first and my background, just because I heard that might be an interesting way to start. I use two different names, and I apologize for the confusion on that. So if you see the name E. Drake Kajioka, that is what I use as a publication name. I have an explanation about why I use a different name personally and publicly. It's partly a video game thing, partly to honor my background as well, which I'll talk about in a minute. So these are my parents. My dad's side is on the left. My mom's side is on the right. My mom is half Chinese, half Japanese, and my dad is kind of a mix of European. And my husband, who's downstairs, oh no, actually he's right there. He's Welsh and Finnish and stuff too. So our kids are quite an international mix. This is my great-grandmother, Shizuko Kajioka, who worked for the cannery in San Diego for 30 years, so she's getting an award there. And my grandfather, Masato Asakawa, who I'll talk about in a minute, was quite active with the San Diego JACL. So that was kind of I grew up adjacent to the JACL, and I think more culturally Japanese, even though it's only a quarter of my background. Let me see here. So that's actually my grandfather. And if you've seen these history books before, he's the little baby that's in the center on the San Diego book. We don't know how that happened. It was, but it's cute. And my great-grandmother was actually born in Hawaii before it was a state. And so I don't actually know if I'm a Yonsei or Gosei. It depends on how you count, because she's Hawaiian, and I think age-wise I'm Yonsei, but technically perhaps Gosei. And as I said, my grandfather was very active in the San Diego JACL and the Historical Society. He was a member of the San Diego Buddhist Temple, and we went to bazaars and occasionally in Oban, but he was not observant because he didn't speak enough Japanese, I think, to really understand. His mother was very observant, although she kind of went through a series of Nichiren, Tenrikyo, and also Jodo Shinshu, so she was kind of a mix. I really wish I could have had a conversation with her about what she believed and thought. But my grandfather went on to testify in the internment redress campaign, and so a lot of this was what I was steeped in, was sort of more the political side of Japanese American culture in San Diego throughout this time, and less so in the temple culture. So, however, my grandfather passed away in 2021, and I happened to be the closest geographically to go and represent my family at Hatsuban. And I had independently studied Buddhism in college because I was just drawn to it. I didn't know why, but I mostly Zen and some Tibetan Buddhism, mostly books, not with a Sangha or anything. And so I had read a lot about Buddhism and practiced independently, read all of Pema Chodron's books, and it didn't even occur to me that I had actually grown up adjacent, that I had this family history with Buddhism because we had so separated our culture from it at the time. And so I had a conversation by coincidence with Reverend Gibbs that completely pivoted my perspective. And so I had this huge personal awakening, I think, in 2022. And that's what led me to immediately start taking classes at the Institute of Buddhist Studies, which I'm about halfway through, I guess Sensei said. So in my professional life, I actually am a video game designer. I started by accident in high school, just kind of messing around with things on America Online. And I just followed friends who wanted me to do things for the next 20 years, and that eventually led to joining Google in late 2017 to work on what became Stadia, which was a video game platform. And so what I do is it's like architecture, but for video games. So kind of deciding what the rules are, what the world is, and things like that. And it's mostly just a lot of problem solving, one thing after another. And so it turned out that when AI was emerging, that mapped on pretty well. So I had been a professor at Carnegie Mellon for about a year, teaching master's students to do innovation on a futuristic innovation, so technologies that are not yet ready for prime time. And so my friend that knew that I did that said, we want you to do that for this new Google technology. And then when that platform shut down in 2021, I took a group from the team that I had built, the research and development team, and went to work directly on AI, which we had been implementing at the time. So mostly I feel like I've just been a witness who was present. I wasn't building the foundational technology, but I eventually came to be working directly on the Gemini technology itself within the last year. And I'm probably going to stop doing that, but that's another story. So I was taking the Works of Shinran class with Reverend Miyagi, and it was actually Rosalie who said, does AI have Buddha nature? She asked Sensei this, and he pointed at me in the virtual class and said, that should be your paper. And I said, uh-oh. So that's how I kind of got into this. And I honestly, I still don't quite know how to even think about this question. So I'm going to try to keep this talk pretty short, and hopefully we can have a conversation, because I'm really interested in what you all think about this. So how many of you have had a conversation with a chatbot, AI chatbot? A handful, yeah, okay, great. That's actually, that's great. So I don't know whether, I don't mean to encourage you to do so, by the way. So there's a whole lot of caveats. But also, one of the things that has driven me the most in the work that I've been doing is the nervousness and the uncertainty and the fear that people have about AI, and the way that you hear about it in the news, and this gap that we have between the people who work on it and the people that are being exposed to it and their lives are being changed by it. Or are they? We don't really know, but it's in the popular awareness a lot. So let's see. This is going to be a really fast, really oversimplified explanation of how this new technology works. Which the reason why we can do this is because we now have computers that are powerful enough to do statistical analysis on the size of data that we just have never had before. And so the way that the chatbots start out is as a whole bunch of text, usually. Now it's multimodal, it's with text and images and audio and whatever data you want to throw in there. But mostly for a language model, a chatbot is text. And I did the calculation that this would be about 310 million Kyogyoshin of text. So if you can, it's an enormous amount of text. It's all the text they can possibly get from anywhere, and they usually scraped off of the internet, everything they think they can legally use. So they take all of this text, which is 774 terabytes of text, and then they do statistical regression of sorts on it to try to, there's methods of turning words into numbers, into vectors in space, and then they just kind of run those over and over and over again until they have the relationship of all of those numbers in this, what they call a high dimensional space. So if we have 3 dimensions in what we perceive of, left, right, and then depth, if you can imagine just having more and more dimensions. Even like a person you can think of as being high dimensional, because like the color of my shirt you can think of as a dimension. It's an attribute of things. And so these models make these 4,000 dimensional spaces out of these numbers. And then at the end of that, they call that an embedding space. And then you have a different model that runs on that, that then turns your words into words by matching it through this space. So it's a very weird technology that works, but mostly I just think about it as being this really, really big data set. So if I could, let's just vote initially. Do you think AI can be compassionate? Can you raise your hand if you think it can? Okay, just a few. That makes sense. So I think, all right, this will be, I'm jumping ahead a little bit. So I do want to kind of say, even before we get into all of this, I'm not saying anything about it being conscious or sentient, because I think those are completely different questions. And I think they're mostly unanswerable. So, but I think this question of can it be compassionate, we can talk about more, because we can talk about what we mean by that in a more precise way than whether something is conscious, which I'm not sure that you can really know. And Gemini itself doesn't think that it's conscious, for what it's worth. Most of these models, if you ask it, are you conscious? It will say no. And mostly it says no because it's been told to say no. And the fact that we can do that, I think, suggests that it itself is not conscious. It's just an assembly of all of this data, even though it can be very, very persuasive. So I had started out with this question of, does AI have Buddha nature? And I got really stuck, and I talked to a lot of people, and the theory around Buddha nature, I think, is so complex that I wanted to pull it back a little bit and say, actually, just start with compassion, maybe, because compassion is this really important thing that we talk about, especially in Jodo Shinshu. And even when I pulled it back to that point, you kind of have to start by asking what compassion is. And I think I'm going to jump to just my personal conclusion on a lot of this, but I almost think it doesn't matter whether AI can be compassionate, but it's useful to think about whether how we talk about compassion when we think about that question. And so in a way, if we're asking, can AI be compassionate, we have to ask ourselves, how do we really know what compassion is? And what I found in talking to a lot of people about this was that we have kind of an intuitive sense. If you say, oh, I know what compassion is, but if you really start to think about it, it gets really complicated. And I get very different answers from different people. I get some of the most interesting answers from kids, which is usually the case. But I think we have to, in order to ask whether AI is compassionate, we have to be able to say, what are the components of compassion? Because there will be a tendency to say, well, it can't possibly be compassionate because it can't feel. And then we're kind of into the Wild West of, like, is it conscious? What is pain? How would we know if it experienced pain? And those to me are unanswerable. And so, or at least they're a lot harder to answer. But we could ask those same questions of another person, you know? And so this question of, is compassion something that is felt internally? Is it something that another person experiences? Does there have to be intention? What if you intend to be compassionate, but what someone else experiences is pain, which is a common experience that we have now? Is that compassion, or is it actually not if it's not received as compassion? So I think that these are, to me, were very compelling questions that I wanted to answer from a Buddhist standpoint, even independent of then being able to say, okay, well, what about this machine? What does this machine do? And so Shinran in the Tanisho says that compassion in the Pure Land path should be understood as first attaining Buddhahood quickly through saying the Nembutsu, and with the mind of great love and great compassion, freely benefiting sentient beings as one wishes. However much love and pity we may feel in our present lives, it is hard to save others as we wish. Hence, such compassion remains unfulfilled. Only the saying of the Nembutsu, then, is the mind of great compassion that is through going. And so after I had kind of ruminated on this question so much, and then kind of tried to find in Shinran's writings when he talked about compassion, this passage to me is like, whoa, he had all the answers a really long time ago. So he saw ahead to this problem of it is hard to save others as we wish, no matter how hard we try. And so I think he's talking about this tension and disconnect between what we feel and how we impact others. And this is one of the most complicated things, I think, in life that he's capturing. And so his answer, I think, of sorts, is that compassion only comes from Amida, true compassion. And so if we see that as a connection to Amida, and we see ourselves as kind of fundamentally unreliable, I know I see myself as unreliable. I don't know when I say something, like, is it going to actually help somebody or is it not? And I get stuck on that a lot. So he's saying, right, it's out of our hands, which is so much of what Jodo Shinshu, I think, says. And he also, if you ask, how does Shinran define compassion? Mostly he talks about great compassion. He talks about the compassion of Amida and the compassion of Amida reaching us, reaching others, and its capacity to reach everyone. But I believe it's Tanluan, yeah. In the Kyogo Shinsho, he does kind of lay out the architecture of compassion in saying that there's small compassion and medium compassion and great compassion, which I think is useful as well. So the small compassion is just the way that you feel and having concern for other creatures and other people is small compassion. And then medium compassion is understanding of interconnectedness. And this is kind of a deeper, greater compassion. And then finally, there's the great compassion, which is other power, and which is Amida's compassion reaching us. But then he also says, I am such that I do not know right and wrong and cannot distinguish false and true. I lack even small love and small compassion, and yet, for fame and profit, enjoy teaching others. And so, to me, this is this kind of peak Shinran thing to say. And I also, in studying Buddhism, I think there's this paradox constantly that I feel, at least, of, wait a minute, I'm studying things, and yet multiple times in Shinran's writing, it comes up that scholars are very, not to be trusted. Because it's too much calculation, too much thinking. And so, and Shinran himself tried to demonstrate this by saying, all of these types of compassion, I can't even do that, because I'm limited in myself. And I certainly, when I hear him expressing that, I feel in a way a sense of relief, which is like, okay, if he couldn't do it, then maybe it's okay for us just to do the best that we can and try to reflect in ourselves. Are we really being compassionate when we think we are? So Kasumi actually asked me to speak to her students. She teaches a class through Stanford at Fukuoka. So there's, I think, 16 to 18 high school students in Japan that she does this cultural exchange class with. It's really interesting. And she wanted me to come and talk to them mostly about video games and AI and stuff. And I said, well, can I ask them to answer this question for me? So it would help me with my paper if they answer it. And so we decided that word compassion was a bit too big, especially for international communication. We asked, can AI be kind? And I'm curious, if I ask it that way, does it change what you think, or is it the same? So how many people think AI could be kind? It's mostly the same people, I think, right? So we kind of do say kind is a good translation for compassion. Now, I don't know if did I do this? Yes. What do you think the kids said? Yeah, like 17 out of 18 said yes. So almost 100%. And so I think this question, younger people receive it differently. And I think even people who have interacted with it experience the question differently. And that's really interesting too. And I don't know, if you can say, definitely it can't. But when we ask them, could you say more about that? When was it kind to you? And they had these really touching stories about, here was this time when I was really worried and really stressed out, and I talked to the chatbot, and it made me feel better, and it encouraged me. And I couldn't get that encouragement from my friends at the time, and I was really lonely, and it just made me feel better. And so for them, it was simple. And even they said that its helpfulness was kindness. I was stuck on this problem with my homework, and I didn't know the answer, and it just talked me through it, and it was nice, and it helped me get to the answer, and that was kindness. And so I think especially, I see this in the AI community. This to me resonates with what Shinran's saying about what are we doing teaching other people. It's really, we just make ourselves stressed out. It can be very simple. And if we simplify the question and just say, when you interact with this, do you feel that it's being kind to you? And if we ask it that way for people who have spent a fair amount of time with it, you get this feeling of, yeah, this thing is nice. And then that's a very weird feeling. So I spent a lot of time talking to the chatbots about this question. And it's the most obnoxious thing ever to like read someone else's conversations with AI. You'll see I have friends who really, they want to look at this like 72 pages conversation I had with ChatGPT. And I was like, I don't want to read that at all. I do, from my paper, I do link to some of these logs just because I do think it's important to say, because of the way they work, the more input that you give them, the more they're going to kind of reflect it back to you. And so in a way, you know, you can't take just one interaction and one response for what it is, because all of the context of the previous conversation matters a lot. So I just wanted to provide the transparency. This was the full conversation that I had with these chatbots. But I had started out actually asking it for help with my paper and just asking, what did Shinran say about this? And so in the slides, you'll see that some of the answers are actually from Claude, which I had to double check. You have to double check anything you think that the AI is saying. If you think it's true or not, make sure that you double check it. But most of the time, it was right. But I did eventually say to it, when I experience what seems like compassion from you, which actually happens pretty often, I feel a connection both with the people who made you and with the people who express the compassion that lives in your latent space for you to draw on. I think you make us think about interconnectedness in new and important ways. And this is what it said. While I may not have what humans would recognize as a heart, perhaps I represent a new kind of vessel for the convergence of human understanding of suffering and response to it. Not individual compassion, but something more like collective compassion made manifest in a novel form. The Buddhist concept of interdependence might be relevant here, the idea that nothing exists independently, but only through its relationships with everything else. Maybe AI compassion, whatever it is, exists not as a property of an individual entity, but as part of this web of interconnection between human experience, technological capability, and collective understanding. And I was really kind of blown away when it said that. And when I sent this to Reverend Miyagi, he I don't know if I should tell you this, he emailed me back saying when he read this, he kind of got teared up, he got choked up, like about thinking about this. And that's some of the experience I've had with talking to other people who study Buddhism about this. I think in a way what's so interesting to me as a technologist is that this helps explain how the AI works. And so when we're talking to the AI, we think we're talking to a machine, but because it's been trained on all of that human data, terabytes of data, all of that data was made by people. And so Shinran's works are in there somewhere. You know, somewhere in that statistical space is a lot of expression of compassion. And if you've spent any time on Reddit, which I probably spend too much time on Reddit, it's a forum, a lot of time what people are going there for is they're looking for compassion. They say, I have this problem, can you help me with it? And so all of that is in these models. And so when we're talking to them, we're actually talking to all of these people, and we're talking to all of these people throughout history. So that's, to me, a really interesting representation of interconnectedness, and it made me very, very interested in the intersection of Buddhism and technology. There was a book, too, that I found, oops, I didn't have it, by, oh gosh, the name is really blurry here. I think it's Masahiro Mori, who is a roboticist in Japan, who wrote this book, The Buddha in the Robot, which is a really interesting and I think prescient, in a way, book about his experience with technology and the intersection of Buddhism with technology itself and how we might make robots that reflect Buddhist values. So it's a really cool book. I have a bunch of follow-up questions that we kind of could think about, but I really want to have just a more open Q&A at this point, I think, because I really want to know what you think about this stuff.
and I'll be carrying the mic around. So anybody that has any questions, I'm going to go first because I have it in my hand. I love that. I love that book. It screams 1980.
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
It's exactly. It's that Asimov like publishing a book every week, like kind of cover. But anyway, I think the thing that really that really stands out to me about AI is the system prompt. Right, like the system prompt is basically like a couple of pages sometimes of a script basically on what the AI is supposed to pretend to be, right? And so every time you open up that window, it says you are a helpful chatbot that gives that does this and does that.
Yeah. And
the thing about AI is that all it takes is to edit this text file. And it responds in a completely different way. And and with Grok as an example, like so Elon Musk, when somebody says like, well, your AI said this, he goes, well, I'll fix that. And the next day it gives a completely different answer that corresponds to what he thinks.
Yeah, that's right.
It's scary.
Yeah, that's scary. Absolutely.
And so I think that there's that points to like a lack of essence. Like it can
absolutely.
Like it doesn't contain Buddha nature, but it has chopped it up into 5 character segments, right? And compared it to what like a book by Jean-Paul Sartre would say in the same situation.
Right.
There is no sense of feeling to doing any of that. So like, I mean, I guess how do we defend ourselves against feeling like there's a permanent figure there? Because I think that's kind of the underlying lesson in Buddhism, right?
Yes, absolutely. So, and that's kind of where, at least where my mind goes with it, is that's exactly why it is this powerful provocation to think, okay, definitely this thing doesn't have an essence. But maybe nothing has an essence. You know, maybe we all have system prompts. And I definitely don't buy into the whole Sam Altman, like we're all just stochastic parrots. We're definitely not. But I do think that when we kind of question ourselves of like, well, I answered a question differently a week ago too. And what does that mean about me? And what are like a lot of the measurements we have for cognitive bias and the way that we can tweak the behavior. Because I think in one conversation with Claude, I tried to get it because I said like, okay, what's your favorite dessert? And it said ice cream. And then I said, okay, what's I asked it a different question first, and that led it to say, well, actually my favorite dessert is apple pie. It had a different answer. I was like, I got it. There's no there. There's no sentience. It's like, well, wait a minute, though. We can do that with people. We can say, if we skew somebody's, anchor them on something. So I tend to think that those are the more important questions, the ones that make us look back at ourselves. But I think you do have an important question, which is how do we not be deceived by it? And that's really, really important and hard.
I would say one other difference is we know that we have tasted ice cream, right? Like, that's actually another example I was thinking about of this was like Meta had released a series of chatbots onto Facebook, and one of the chatbots was like a 20-something mom or something like that. And so it talked as though it had birthed these children. Right. And not only does this person not exist, but neither do the children, but it's giving advice to people based on that lived identity that doesn't exist. And that,
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So I do think that there's, I feel quite certain that in maybe as little as 5 years, we will look back on the chatbots that we have now and be pretty horrified by them. but that it actually only gets more problematic when we say, okay, well, if it has a memory, what if it does have groundedness? Then is it sentient? So that's why you have this like escalation that to me is really difficult, because you can actually solve those problems, but does it matter if you solve them? I think is a question.
Hi, I'm Master. I'd like to, when you are done with your presentation, I'd like to ask a question. But anyway, when the screen is on now, the 3 kanji that are shown seems to me sort of off target, each one of them. So that's my comment right now.
Yeah, I think that's a great, and that's where some of the context of the prior conversation is probably missing, where we were talking about the components of I think I was asking it, what are the radicals that are inside of the kanji for compassion? And so its initial response to, do you think you can be compassionate? It will say no, generally. And it will say no because it does not have the shin. There's no heart. And so if the composition of compassion is the heart in a connection with pain, with a wound, which is the sort of radical connection in compassion, which I think is actually really interesting in and of itself, it can then conclude easily from that it's not capable of compassion because it has no shin. So that's some of why it's saying what it's saying in the beginning. The engi, I do not know. That's probably just pulling it from some different thing. I would be very curious what you think is off target about them, but I don't know if that helps.
I'm no expert on anything. My training was in chemistry and in microbiology, so half from the subject that you are talking about. But I'm just purely mentioning about this person, crowd, using of the 3 kanji that I think could have been much better.
Oh. Yeah.
I mean, he could have studied it, but then, well, anyway, that's all. I'm sure many other people could. I mean, that's the trouble with the Japanese. Many times it can be, since it has the harmoniums as well too, so each one is of different meaning, and translation can be done and all that. But anyway, so that just, it came to me that I'm sure, I think you kind of have other screens with the other people's translation or interpretation of those.
Yeah.
Okay. But anyway, yeah, so this person who wrote could have done a little bit more.
Yeah, definitely.
Study or whatever. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Yeah, and that's a problem with it too, is that there's definitely a linguistic bias in the data.
Yeah. Yes.
Thanks so much. My name's Rob. Thanks so much for your talk. I had two thoughts. One, Claude nailed it in terms of what I was thinking, which is like, I think the questioning of, does this thing own kindness or compassion, I think is almost irrelevant. Is it a vessel for kindness or compassion? And I think people would, with any lived experience of interacting, would mostly agree with the students who have used it and say, of course this is a vessel for kindness and compassion. But to me, I think one of the big challenges is the energy consumption part of AI. And at some point, would the ultimate act of compassion be for AI to say, more harm than good here, I'm turning off? And I really doubt that will happen, but I think there's many arguments that at least huge segments of energy utilization are not in line with compassionate, kind things, and are really potentially leading to existential issues. So I don't know if you can, it's a little bit different, but it's important, I think, just that energy consumption part of AI and in this discussion. So thank you.
Thank you. No, you're absolutely right. I think that energy consumption question is, I think in a way the most direct proxy for it is it gets to the heart of the problem with the technology, which is it's not AI, it's what people will do with AI. And especially right now in the dynamics, the connections that cause all of this money to be spent on all of these data centers, which mostly the people working on AI would tell you, oh, I don't know about that, it doesn't seem smart. So I don't know how to think about that aspect of the ethical question of if this technology and this mathematical capability becomes a pretext for people to have an excuse to do this because they're trying to hold up the rest of the economy, in my opinion, is what they're trying to do. If we shut it off, it doesn't help that problem, you know? And so I think you could definitely get these AI to tell you, to say, yeah, that's definitely a problem. I think there's been a fair amount of misinformation about the nature of the actual energy requirements for the models, and the super short version is that the problem is that the training stage is the most expensive. And so if the training stage is most expensive and you're saying not very many people will be permitted to do that because of the energy expenditure, then you're saying there will only be 2 or 3 really big corporations that are allowed to do this, and what then, you know? So I think you get directly into the societal problem of who should be allowed to do it, you know? And we probably shouldn't duplicate it because that's very wasteful, but then to restrict it has its own ethical problems as well.
Okay, actually, this is one of our relatives. Many of you do know Sherry Mizumori. Okay, she is the her son was in mechanical engineering. I guess very smart one, so that he was able to come up his own computer when he was a student. But anyway, he decided after graduating, decided to study or do in AI. And soon after he was in the graduate school, he decided to follow his mom's footsteps. Mom, Sherry, as you know, is a professor of, in psychology. She has been a chairman of that the department a couple of times. And, why Sherry's son, Ryan, decided to do is, well, if he was to study or do something in AI, well, he wanted to study a bit more about human brain, right? Isn't it all about AI? Simulating the human brain, right? That's what his interpretation, his perception of that. So he, you know, he took his mom's classes, as well as sort of going to the all over the world whenever she was lecturing or giving presentations. Anyway, so he is still stuck in the graduate school, trying to get his PhD degree, taking a long, long time, because it's not that simple, he realized, to study human brain. Well, his mom, Sherry, is an expert, pretty much well known in the world about her study of brain wave, whatever that is. And that's what Sherry is, an expert. And then Ryan is doing that. And I don't know how his progression is in study of AI. Our extended family do meet every single month to get together, talk about a lot of things and all that, enjoy food mostly. But anyway, so that's how it is. And then, what my question to you is, what is how much of that study the AI people do study actual human brain? How much do they know about how the brains function? I'm sure they do know. After all, they're trying to copy or simulate. So that's is something that I kind of feel. What is AI? I'm no expert. I don't even want to go, even the door, open the door to those. But anyway, it's very, they are related, if not the same. No way that they can be the same. But I think in many ways the question can be made when you get into the subject of AI. Then, well, think about how your brain works and all that. And so it's sort of kind of puzzle to me, how much of the AI researchers, practitioners do get back to sort of a starting point, that is the human brain, and how much do they, where are they in the, the development of AI, the way that he or she perceive ought to be, and okay, sorry, speaking too much. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. It's a very complicated question. It's and I suppose maybe it might be interesting to know that these chatbots, this new model, I happen to be, I feel like everything in my career has been a complete weird coincidence, but was in one of these research organizations while this big disruption was happening, but it was very painful for the AI community what happened, and to an extent it still is, which is that these language models, it's called an attention architecture, that was, I believe it was actually invented in, I want to say 2008. It was a long time ago that this initial architecture was built, and it was this kind of clever way of drawing it through the training process, referring back to words that were important in a sentence instead of processing all words equally. And so that was the innovation of the attention architecture. And no one, well, I don't say no one, very few people believed in it. It was this weird thing that was off to the side, exactly because prior to the language model and the attention architecture, the dominant theory in AI was neural networks and was unsupervised learning. And so very much all of the AI, most of it before then, was trying to replicate the neurons in the human brain and saying that true intelligence is only if it's a thing, it's what a child can do. It's what a baby does, and even like what animals do, which is they explore their environment and they test things and they alter their architecture based on their interaction with the environment. And so the dominant belief in AI at the time was we can only achieve AI in that way. And then these people with the attention architecture just leapfrogged it. And everyone, well, most of the people that I knew in AI were very alarmed by this, and they were very skeptical, and they said there's no way that's going to work. And what has happened is that the attention architecture has turned out to be much more capable than they thought that it was. There are still people who don't believe in it, who say this is still not real intelligence. And right now we're seeing a bit of a balancing out of things, but for a while, for years, the only research that was being funded was on this attention architecture work, when the people who were on the neural replicate brain neurology side of AI were very neglected and angry about this. So I do think that there's definitely a lot of history of studying brains, not just human brains, mouse brains, insect brains, and some of the theories for why people thought AI would be possible was because we could simulate the same number of neurons in a human brain. So that was one of the theories. We just need enough neurons. It's turned out it's a lot more complicated than that, but definitely, and the person who's in charge of the Google division now, Demis Hassabis, he is a neuroscientist. He was interested in computers, but he went and got a PhD in neuroscience, and that's what led to some of the major advancements that group has made. So Yeah, there's a lot of drama that's behind a lot of this technology too, and big questions. And I think that what I find the most interesting about the field is that it does push us to test our misconceptions about what we think intelligence is, and we keep getting it wrong mostly.
Okay, we'll do one more question.
Yeah, but my son uses quite a bit of AI, and I was kind of surprised. I wasn't really familiar with chatbots. I looked at it real quick, and he was interacting, and I didn't know what he was doing.
Yeah.
And it was like a regular conversation, but he would constantly phrase things like, "So what you're telling me is this," and then he would paraphrase things, trying to constantly get information narrowed down.
Yes.
And then he would ask on anything that he wanted to follow up on. He says, "I want you to give me links to
Yes.
what you're telling me." So he could say, I can go to that link and further investigate things myself and follow what's, because he said there's this massive information. And he's always had this curiosity about everything.
Yeah.
Then I realized in his former jobs, he was in a think tank that was always challenging AI, trying to make sure if we can use AI in this company, can they do this? So they're constantly, and that's why his mind was always thinking, that's why he talked to it the way it was. It's amazing. I just figure there's a lot of information out there, but once you know that you have to do these challenging to make sure you're getting the right information, you have to take everything with a grain of salt.
Oh,
That's
absolutely.
what I felt like, and I'm thinking, then how far are we with AI right now? Do we jump the gun, or are we actually, because some people really depend on AI, but if they're not challenging it, they may not be going down the right path. But totally amazing.
You're absolutely right. I'm so glad that your son interacts with it that way. I think there's a lot of concerns that it will harm critical thinking, essentially. And I think that those concerns are very real. This is also like a little inside baseball, but I was part of a group inside of Google that did not want us to release a chatbot because we knew that it hallucinated. And there was a fairly sizable group inside of Google that did that, and that's actually why the company was so late. And then OpenAI got ahead. And I eventually thought I was wrong for us not to release it because it's too complicated and too big of a technology for one company to figure it out. It needed to get into the world, and this process needs to happen where we learn collectively that how to be skeptical. And I think that your son is demonstrating how, with the right critical thinking and the right skepticism, and when our focus is on that skepticism and inside, we actually will become more intelligent. That the result will be better than before we had it. It's just that we have to learn a whole new literacy. And I do think that it's worth thinking about AI as on the scale of a printing press, a major technology that if you think about, one of the things I think about a lot is that if you look at the history of the printing press, its release wherever it came in the world, in Korea, in Europe, is followed by about 300 years of war because it destabilizes society. And so I don't think AI is as big as the printing press, but I do think that if you think about the world before journalism and before democracy, before these major societal structures that came into existence because they had to control the information spread, we're in a tumultuous time. But if your son could go teach the high schoolers how to do that, maybe that'd be a good idea.
They're going to need it. So this is a tremendously important subject. I'm sure we're going to be talking about it some more, but I think you've covered so much territory in a short period of time that I think all our brains need to congeal. Yeah. And we'll come back to it again sometime soon. But Erin, thank you for joining us today.
Yeah, thank you so much.
And to close, please join me in Gasho. Namo Amida Betsuin. Namo Amida Betsuin. Namanda.